Hello, and welcome to Mr. D Says, Episode 1. Today I'll be talking to you about the parts of a story. You may remember in class that I've talked to you about the fact that stories pose problems. They put forward some sort of question, and ultimately, the end of the story will give us some sort of solution to that problem or an answer to the question. In the past, the way that I've best liked to represent this is with a little line that looks something like this. And this is what I call my plot roller coaster. The plot roller coaster is basically a line that represents the plot or the storyline and how it moves visually. Now, I realize looking at it right now, it looks like a little mountain and a big mountain, and in fact, that's what they are. But each of these little bumps in the road represents something in a story. We're going to start with the introduction. Now, the introduction is the very beginning of the story here. This is the part of the story where we introduce our characters, we introduce our narrator, and we have an idea of where the story is taking place or when. Take, for instance, the story of The Lord of the Rings, where we start off in a place called Middle-earth, and the first characters that we meet all have hairy feet and are things called hobbits. Now, that's something we want to know early on, and we don't want to be finding out later on in the story. So we put it here in the introduction. That gets us started. But we still need a problem in order to have a story, and that generally comes in right around here with the inciting incident. The inciting incident is that bump in the road that sort of sets the story in motion. It takes us from simply talking about a setting and characters that aren't doing anything and gives us something to do, so it sets everything in action. Once we've had the inciting incident and we start working towards the ultimate solution, tension starts to mount in the story. And that takes us to this next little piece of the story here. It's this hill, and it's generally very steep. That's what we call the rising action. And basically throughout this part, there are complications that happen along the way. So if we were talking again about the Lord of the Rings, and we took someone like, say, Frodo, and here Frodo finds out that he has a ring that he has to take all the way to Mount Doom and destroy. Well, in here, there are going to be opportunities for him to get rid of the ring. But as those opportunities come along, there are going to be reasons why he can't, and so there are complications. What that does is it builds tension in the story. We wonder whether or not he's going to ultimately be able to destroy the ring, or whether something bad is going to happen to him instead. As that tension mounts, we build up to this high point here, which is called the climax. Now, at the climax of the story, that's about as high as the tension is going to get. It's probably about as serious as the action is going to get. And at times I've told you, say for instance in a mystery story, this is the aha moment. It's the moment where we really get a clear idea of how the problem is going to be resolved. After which, the action falls off fairly quickly, probably even more steeply than I've drawn it here. And that part of the story is what we generally refer to as the falling action. So this is the part of the story where generally things are working towards their end. We're going to start wrapping things up very quickly so that way we can end the story. So we have a pretty good idea of what our solution is at this point. Maybe it's already underway and it's just working itself out. So at this point, say for instance that Frodo has been marching up Mount Doom after many trials and tribulations. He finally gets here. We're about I would say 4/5 of the way through the story, maybe even further. He throws the ring down into the volcano and it's destroyed. And at that point, things start to wrap up. Well, ultimately, this falling action, which happens fairly quickly, is going to bring us to what we refer to as the denouement. And yes, it's an English word as well, although it comes from French. And what denouement means, quite literally, is the untying of the knot. So if you think of the problem as being a string that's been tied up in a great big snarl, then what we're trying to do through the course of the story is figure out how that string is knotted up so that we can eventually untie it and resolve the problem. So the denouement is that part of the story where all of those various knots have been untied. Now in the case of the Lord of the Rings, if we were going to go up here and here we've destroyed the ring in Mount Doom, then here we have Frodo, who is going to go back home and everything is going to sort of settle itself out. He'll be a changed character, of course, and so will most of the characters that have been in the story. And ultimately, all of the loose ends that we've maybe had along the way, all of the other little plot lines that maybe took place, they're going to get resolved here in the denouement. And ultimately, will have found the solution to our problem. Now, in some cases, that solution is going to be something that is happy. And in some cases, that solution is going to be something that's not happy. But that's a story for another episode. Thank you very much.